I'm going to tell you a story that actually happened about 8 months ago, and I'm finally ready to talk about it. As you might have guessed from the title or the thumbnail of this video, my rays are dead. And today I want to tell you the story of what happened. I've decided that to tell this story, I'm just going to start from the night of the incident. April 25th of last year was a Saturday, and as a lot of Saturdays, my daughter has sleepovers with her friends. They usually take over the basement when they have their sleepovers. The difference, though, was at 1 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to my daughter screaming that there is a fire. I am a deep sleeper, but when you hear your daughter screaming for you, you immediately wake up. I had no clue if there was a fire or how bad it was, but as soon as I came down in the basement, the smell was overwhelming. I ran downstairs and got the kids out of the basement and all of my family out the back door. I came back in and realized that the smell was coming from my fish room. I go into my fish room and I can see my 300-gallon sump has black smoke coming out of it. I quickly get over to it and it's bubbling up this black smoke. I immediately pull all of the power cords from the wall, which shuts down all of the tanks. I do a quick check around the house to see if there was anything else, and there wasn't. But by this time, the ventilation in my house had carried all of that smell from the fire downstairs throughout the rest of the house. So I opened all the windows and started airing out the house, and then the family came back in and kind of went to bed. They were all a little bit shooken up and worried, but I basically told them it was nothing to worry about. Even though I was about to go through the longest night of my hobby. I knew something failed in my sump. There's only one electrical component in my sump, and those are heaters. I start inspecting all of my heaters, and I realized it was one of my Cobalt Neotherm 200-watt heater. Out of the 5 that I had, only one was causing the problem. I pulled the heaters out, and I quickly realized that only one of the Cobalt heaters was affected. But it was pretty bad. It appeared to have exploded. The bottom had blown off and this black ooze was coming out of it. As I set it down on my concrete floors, it was still smoldering. At this point, everything had happened so quickly, and I hadn't really paid attention to the fish. The arowana was up by the surface, acting kind of weird, but my rays were not moving. With the tank shut off and me noticing that it was only the rays that are dead, I decided that I need to remove whatever toxins are in the tank water, so I started to do a 100% water change at about 2 o'clock in the morning. The rays were dead and had to be moved though, but being such a big animal, they have to go in the dumpster. And up until this point, I guess I would say that I was kind of in shock by it all, almost numbed by the situation, and sort of just going through the motions. It wasn't until the moment that my rays were thrown in the dumpster and I closed the lid that it all hit me. Everything before and everything after did not affect me nearly as much as throwing my rays in the garbage. I was up till about 5 o'clock that morning, doing the water changes, monitoring the fish, making sure that everything was, still okay. I woke up the next morning and I was mad. Not only did I just lose my rays, but there was a lot of damages to the house. We couldn't get the smell out. I have drop ceilings in my basement, and those all had to be replaced. I also had to dry clean all of the drapes and blinds within my house that cover the windows, and paint all of the walls again. I did this over the course of a couple of weeks while I mourned the loss of the rays. Even at that point, I was not ready to tell anybody or even talk about it. In fact, I decided I would not talk about it until the time was right for me. I didn't want to relive the night the rays died over and over and over again every day. So I basically just played it off like the rays were fine. I didn't talk about them, and if somebody asked how they were doing, I would say fine and kind of cut it short. I decided to contact my insurance agency because at this time, after the dry cleaning, the painting, and replacing the ceilings, not to mention the cost of the rays, I was out thousands of dollars. After several weeks of working with the insurance company, they finally said, those heaters are not CSA approved, there's nothing we can do. Now, before we go any further, aquarium equipment fails all the time. There's no company or product out there that will never fail. Everything is prone to fail eventually. Some things more than often. We could do everything we can to prevent it, but at the end of the day, these things happen. So originally I wasn't expecting these to be faulty heaters, or that there was anything wrong with them. But I kind of decided to look into it anyways. And when I simply typed in Cobalt Neotherm blew up, I got over 50 instances on the first page alone. It was at this point where I realized I'm not the only one, and this is a big problem. And I will admit that I was very angry. All I wanted to do was immediately turn on a camera and scream into the camera how horrible these heaters are. I'm truly happy I didn't do that because I don't think Cobalt or the Neotherm heater deserves it. I think Cobalt does a lot of great things for the hobby, and we need more companies like them. So I certainly hope this video doesn't come across as if I'm out to get them. This is not the case. But I was angry. The more and more I looked into it, the more and more stories I heard. During my searching though, I did find Cobalt involved in discussions about the heaters blowing up and acknowledging that there is an issue. All of these discussions happened way prior to my heater blowing up. So I immediately thought, you knew something was wrong and didn't do anything. If you would have said something, perhaps my rays would still be here. My anger went from anger to rage. But again, I can't just jump on camera and try to destroy some company because I'm angry. I gave myself more time to collect my thoughts and become more level-headed about the event. I wanted to wait till I was no longer financially motivated, as well as no longer emotionally motivated. When I felt the time was right, I contacted Cobalt and asked for the truth. What's wrong with these heaters? Obviously there's something. They told me that the 150 watt and 200 watt Neotherm heaters were originally launched in the United States in October 2012. But there had been European versions of these heaters already in service for several years prior with no problems. About 18 months into launching these heaters, they started to get reports on the heaters cracking. Over the next month, they heard a few more. So obviously they knew there was an issue with the heater, and upon investigation, they discovered that it was possible to assemble the heater in such a way that it allowed the resin inside of it to be unevenly distributed. When this happened, the hardened resin could potentially liquefy and crack the casing. Obviously this didn't happen to all of the heaters. It was just a very small amount. But those numbers don't matter when it's you that it happens to. Cobalt then stopped producing the heater and spent a year redesigning and testing the production process, which would eliminate the possibility of the earlier production process. During that time, they also changed the resin that was in the heater previously. Cobalt also told me that all customers were taken care of through their warranty process, including myself. Even with the flaw that the Neotherm had, the Cobalt heater's return rate is still amongst the best in the industry, if not the best, according to Cobalt, meaning that their failure rate is really low. To sum this up, the old design of the heater basically allowed for the odd heater to fail, but that number was really low. Now it's been solved and there's virtually no issues with the new heater. During my discussions with Cobalt, I told them that all I really wanted was information to tell you guys. I didn't want to create a frenzy or a panic with anybody that has Cobalt heaters thinking they're going to fail. I hope that I've put you guys at ease with this. I don't want to make this sound like this is a recent problem either. The Cobalt Neotherm having that issue happened a couple of years ago. I was just recently affected about 8 months ago. I'm really happy that I did learn the facts of this though. Because if I didn't, I would have let my emotion get the best of me and did some irreversible damage. I just wish I could have talked about this sooner, but I was absolutely devastated over these rays and really didn't want to talk about it. I know that might sound silly, but I'd be reliving the death of these rays every day if I had told you when it first happened, and it was just too soon for me. Now you guys are probably wondering, what happened since then? What has life been like after the rays? What's my hobby been like? What have I done? What am I going to do? What's coming up next? Where do we go from here? And I'm going to talk about all of that and show you everything that's changed next Sunday. Anyways, I'll see you guys then.